Hello, good evening and welcome. In our top story, we have a look at a strongly worded open letter that was drafted by Gerard Papenfuss. He's the chief executive of NEASA. That's an organization that represents many small and medium enterprises that are run by their founders, in other words, the entrepreneurial class. He sent it to an unusual destination.
Why Gwede Mantashe? Why not Cyril Ramaphosa or any other member of the cabinet?
You must, at least I think you have to write an open letter always within a context of a particular event. You can do it anytime, but in this case, Gwede Mantashe made certain remarks during a television interview where he said that, whites hate BE because of the fact that, we want to protect our white supremacy. And then he made certain statements that, didn't really make sense. And I felt that, and the fact that he said, we don't want to see blacks prosper and take up positions of ownership. And so I had to respond to that and just point out to him that he's simply wrong. Also that it's not a question of white anger also. And it is, I think everybody, except those that really benefit, and if you can call it benefit from the scheme, doesn't like it at all. I mean, we detest it. And it's costing the country so much. So I just putting it right with Gwede.
You say you detest it, you don't hate it. I think for some people observing this, that'll seem like semantics. What do you mean by it, though?
Well, hate is I just say that the word hate is there's a bad connotation to the word hate, but it is a terrible thing that what it's doing to the country cannot have any amount of approval from our side or from anybody. So he used the word hate, and I just I don't want to use the word. I don't want to be filled with any form of hate. So I don't walk around daily. Hate is something that fills your mind, your being, and I don't want to be filled with hate in any way. So, but I think you're right if you say there's an amount of semantics to this. But I mean, we see the impact it's having on the economy and on people, and so I just wanted to let him know he's wrong. And first of all, why we detest this thing, and what is going wrong. We see it. We live that daily. We see businesses struggling because of this, because this is no longer a normal economy. No, we don't live in a normal economy. We live in an economy where a economic structure is created, an unnatural economic structure where certain people get preference not on the basis of merit, but purely based on political alliance and color.
Veteran money manager Piet Viljoen had a swim against the tide approach about 3 years ago. And in the last 18 months, that has come home with a bang. I asked him in an interview we had yesterday whether or not a repeat is offing in 2026, a repeat of where the South African stock market outperformed pretty much everything last year, including Wall Street.
Look, to the extent that valuation determines investment outcomes, which it does to a large extent, I think we can continue to expect this sort of trend happening. As we've been speaking about for a number of years, 2, 3 years, 4 years now, South African assets are fundamentally undervalued, and they are fundamentally underowned by South African investors and by offshore investors. I think emerging market investors are very underweight South Africa, and South African investors have been listening to advisors telling them to take their money offshore as fast as they can, as much as they can. So they also have very little exposure to South African assets. So it's undervalued and underowned. So I think the combination of that, with the backdrop of improving fundamentals in terms of lower oil prices, higher precious metals prices, and lower interest rates, I think argues for continued good performance from South African assets. On the other hand, US assets are massively overowned. The US makes up over 70% of the NECI world, whereas the GDP is probably only about 40%, if that, of the world. So it's massively overrepresented in the index, and investors are overweight the US. So I think it's overowned and overvalued. So you have, on the one hand, overowned, overvalued assets, on the other hand, underowned, undervalued assets. And I think that argues, in the absence of anything else, that the undervalued assets should outperform, as they have been doing now for 18 months.
Iran may have given up its place at the center of the global news cycle, certainly in the headlines thereof, but not for long, I would imagine, because there are American warships heading from southern Asia to the Persian Gulf. They will arrive within the week. Let's hear from Iraj Abedian why this time the riots in Iran will prove to be different.
Two reasons why this is different from the past. One is that this is not an sporadic or unconnected incidents. This is the culmination of 30 years of attempts and tries and learning by the society collectively. As I mentioned earlier, this is the first time in 47 years that all strata of the society, young and old, tribal, etc., have coalesced, because it began with the implosion of the currency. Even the rich, or those who said, we are okay, we're comfortable, it's the working class that's suffering, but I'm not going to upset my earnings and my wealth. Their wealth and their income disappeared within 3 days. The currency lost 46% of its value within 4 days. When your wealth disappears like that, trade comes to standstill. Remember, Iran is a trading nation. It imports just about everything, from food to medicine to whatever. Now, if you're a trader, a wholesaler, your imported value goes up by 46-50%, and your demand disappears. You can't even sell because you don't know how you're going to replace it. And if you replace it, how are you going to sell it? Many small, medium, very relatively successful businesses disappeared within 10 days. And I know many of them before this outbreak or revolution movements. So businesses suddenly lost their value, incomes lost value, shortage of food as we speak, shortage of cooking oil, eggs, chicken, you name it. And the government, and this is not accusation, it's on luckily recorded, the president went from province to province the week before this uprising to say, look, as a government, we can't do anything. We don't have a solution. If anybody has got a solution, please, my office is open. Come and help us to find the solution. There is shortage of water. There is shortage of electricity. There is shortage of food stuff, medicine, and so on. And salaries for the pensioners and many of the public servants are not paid on time. Now, if you have that situation, economics is like when you have a massive heap of dead wood, dry, something sparks the fire. The spark was the economic one, but the problem is bigger, wider, and more chronic than economics. It was lack of life, lack of future. The youth are saying we have two choices: either die slowly and miserably or die with a bullet. They have now said, we're out. If it's a bullet, we take the bullet. This is different. The second thing that's different, Alec, I'm sorry if I'm being figurative. I'm just copying what I hear from those who are in the streets. And I'm also confused as to what is so different. The second and very important thing that is different, up to now, people have been fighting for a cause, women or proper voting, counting, etc. This time, they say we don't want this regime. We want this dictator to go. We want Islamic government to disappear from the face of our country. In fact, the message is until these are buried, Iran cannot be freed.
Michelle's a mom who traded in her Fiat 500 for this beast right here. But why the momentous move, huh?
I needed something bigger to keep up with my growing son and his many sports bags.
When you traded in your car with We Buy Cars, was it an easy conversion?
I see what you did there. The process was just so easy. I was given a tablet, had to sign, and that was it.
Basically, We Buy Cars is no mess, no... Okay, it was nice chatting. We Buy Cars, the easiest way to sell your car by far.
Well, as we heard earlier in the program, Piet Viljoen thinks we're in for another good year on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. His opponent in the R1 million challenge that we're running on BizNews, Magnus Heystek, feels that he might be over-optimistic on this score, and he warns that it's time to walk lightly.
Look, there is a higher degree of optimism. First of all, the government of national unity seems to have calmed the markets and calmed the minds of the people. Yet you must not forget that our economy, and I saw the statistic yesterday, that our trade surplus, which suddenly rocketed in December, was not as a result of things getting better. It was as a result of imports that have dropped very sharply because the economy was so weak. So the economy itself, and you can only go according to the statistics, is still flatlining. It is actually shrinking. Manufacturing is shrinking. And and I want to use the word a lucky country once again. We've had a tremendous commodity boom over the last year, 18 months, which creates the impression that things are well. But this had nothing to do with the ANC's policies or anything that they've done. It was purely on the back of the macro numbers suddenly falling into place, the dollar dropping sharply, the dollar's sharpest drop in 25 years, commodities screaming through the roof, our gold shares up 180%, our resources stock up 60%, the stock market itself in dollar terms is up like 40 or 50%, which is tremendous. But that was as a result not of the ANC's doing. At the ANC conference just before the close of the year, the ANC was still committing itself to the National Democratic Revolution. It was the first point Ramaphosa made in his speech. Expropriation Act is still sitting there, but the economy is not showing signs of coming to life. And I can only talk what I see, and it's point to saying, yes, it will get better, and we must fast back and stomp on. I don't sing from that hymn sheet. I look at the facts, and unfortunately, there is, to answer your question, there is a probability. I'm not saying it's going to happen. One must be very careful about. We have a false dawn again, and then the economy just doesn't perform as expected, and then the money will flow out again. And it's worth noting, despite the sharp uptick in the JSE and the strengthening of the rand, the foreign investors have not been buying SA equities. They've been buying SA bonds. They're not buying our equities. And even Alan Gray, in a recent report, said they see better opportunities offshore. Morningstar says better opportunities offshore. You've got local fund managers, no names, no petrol, are very optimistic about the local market, but that is predicated on this economic revival happening. And there's the danger that one gets it wrong. You say the economy is going to recover, our banks and industrials offer great value, and then it doesn't happen. So one must be very, in Afrikaans to say, katvoetloop with these very bullish forecasts for the markets.
Thanks for joining us. We'll be back again tomorrow. Cheerio.